Hello guys, good afternoon or good morning. How are you doing? Today I wanted to show you how I made this really cool isometric formation diagram for my final jewelry. Okay, so we're starting off with a 3D model made in Revit. That's just the software that I use. You can use any kind of 3D software that you use, if it was AutoCAD or SketchUp. And the goal here is just to find the perfect isometric view that you can see two planes from and more. So as you can see a kind of like a 2-point perspective for your model. That's really what you're trying to achieve. And you want to get it nice and crisp, and then you want to plot it as a PDF. And the reason why we're plotting it as a PDF instead of an image is because that we want to keep the proportions and the measures of the model itself. We don't want to change that. And once you do that, you can go ahead and load your model in Photoshop first. So now what you're going to be doing is outlining your model, starting with the base first. So I started with a base rectangular or a square model, and that's how I started to think about my form. So this is how I'm starting the base of my isometric diagram. And I did this using Photoshop, honestly, because it was the easiest software for me. I'm still learning Illustrator and trying to be okay with the fact that I have to use Illustrator somehow. Um, so this is why I'm just starting off with Photoshop, and as you can see, I'm outlining the shapes and coloring them using different colors so that the colors or the form would not mesh together. And I really recommend doing this step, and I also recommend giving names to your shapes, specifically if you have more than one main shape. That way you can turn on and off their layers very easily, just like how I did now. And mainly I'm using the lasso tool because it's so much easier to outline your shapes and then just color them in using the paint tool. And if you had trouble drawing your shapes, specifically in like hidden areas or areas where the edge is not clear, you're just not sure about, you can always go ahead and start with a sketch with your lines and then fill them in using your lasso tool. So just as you can see here, I was having some trouble drawing this edge. So I referenced it using the other model in my drawing and just used that edge as a base for my drawing. So just continue doing that until you finish all your buildings. And once you have finished all of your models, you want to make sure that nothing is sticking to each other and that each building is separate. And then you want to also go in and just fix your edges and make sure that they are clean and very clear for the next step. As you can see here, now I'm bringing them in and making sure that they are clean and obvious. Okay, so now I just transferred my drawing to Illustrator, and then I'm just going over my drawing using the pen tool. And as you can see, this step is very easy and very smooth because we already have the base and the clear edges. And I'm also using the white color and black outline just so that it would go along with my boards. And once you use these sort of monochromatic colors or toned down colors, you can really add focus to the other points. So since this is just the base, I don't want it to take too much attention. I'm going to show you later how we're going to compose the entire thing. So just try to think of that while you're also doing this step. So once you finished outlining, you want to create a group for your drawing because we're going to be adding a number of um, variations for this diagram. So you just want to group them so that they won't get lost or you won't lose your perspective. And make sure that you remove the layer behind them because I was struggling with that. Like it took me a while to realize why I kept grouping them and then the back layer would also show up. So just, I mean, don't repeat my mistakes. Okay, so by now you should have two models ready. And now what we're going to do is that we're going to start creating the story of how we got our final model. So starting off with the first model, you're going to cut it up and create the second model or the second formation that you reached while you were trying to get your final form. So try to make these diagrams as clear as possible. And what I always try to do is that I tend to just create a model for each phase, you can say, or for each change. So I would start off by changing just one thing at a time. That way it would make it much more easier for the jurors to understand the story or to understand how I got to this form. So now I went back to my final form and I wanted to highlight the strength of my design using the red color. So for me, I ended up having five views or five diagrams in order to reach my final form. And so now I'm just trying to create the final one. Okay, so this is it for this video. Thank you for joining me so much, and I hope that you'll join me in the next video where I finalize this diagram and show you how I use Photoshop to create this cool collage texture that I added to this diagram.